a small farmer, and sometimes people ask me to help them start a small farm. So I want to tell you about a recent one. This property owner was pumped about growing vegetables, and I said, heck yes, I would love to help you get started. Before we get started, let's make sure we're both on the same page about what that actually looks like, because you definitely don't want to get halfway through digging up someone's property and they hear, wait, we have to do what? Well, let me walk you through this thing. The homeowner had about a half acre of property and wanted to farm the backyard, so about a quarter acre. That's small, so let's look at the math. A quarter acre with our long North Carolina growing season can push out anywhere between 1 and 20 tons of vegetables per year. Yes, that is a huge range. It depends on what you grow and basically how much effort and capital you want to put into it, like drip irrigation and cold tunnels. If you sell the veggies at $3.50 a pound, that's $7,000 to $140,000 a year, or about $1,300 to $13,000 each month of a 9-month growing season. And assume, as a rule of thumb, you'll keep 5 to 10% of that as profit, anywhere between $65 and $1,300 a month that you actually get to keep. Is that a full-time living? No. Can it be a respectable side hustle? At that size, it's borderline, so you'd really have to nail it to be worth it. That's why I like to run the math with people before we do anything, because I don't want to sell people expectations that cannot be met, right? We want to make sure we have clarity before we get into it. So we walked through the math and she said, that works for me. So we moved on to the next step. Let's talk siting. Let's go check out the property in person and game out how do we get water to the plants. Let's make sure that we actually know what the property setbacks are and where we can actually plant. Is there a septic tank? Where is it? Let's not plow it up. And do you have critters that we have to protect the plants from, like raccoons or rodents or deer? Foreshadowing. First thing first, water, because sometimes you have to water your plants. I like drip irrigation. This property owner had municipal water, which is usually the most expensive kind of water, but it's always there and it's clean. So we checked her water bill to find out what her water rate would be and mathed out how much irrigation would add to her monthly water bill. That came out to $200 or $300 a month. I said, hey, is that okay? She said yes. On to the next step in siting. Where's that septic tank? This was a home in a newer suburban Exurban development that didn't have municipal sewer service. That was part of why the lots were a half acre. They have to leave room for all the septic tanks. And farming in tight quarters with septic tanks is no trees, because the roots can get in there and mess up the pipes. You can't plow over it because you could puncture a line. Even rototilling is a little risky. If your septic tank has a problem or if there's flooding, you can get septic juice seeping up out of the ground. So you want to know exactly where that field is and keep veggies at least 10 feet away from it. So we found the septic field and it's half the backyard. I cannot recommend to someone that we grow veggies on their septic field, so we're down to less than a quarter acre at this point. Okay, next thing, we check the HOA rules, because this is a home, again, in a newer suburb, exurban development, and they all have HOAs now, homeowners association. There's nothing in the bylaws that says you can't grow food, good start, but there was a lot about how your landscaping has to be pretty, or they can come tear it down and charge you for it. So we made a note that, all right, whatever trellis we use for those tomatoes has to be cute. So now we almost had enough information to make a proposal. Here's what you want done in your property, here's how we can achieve it, and this is how much it will cost and what everybody's responsibilities will be in making it happen. So I put down a little map of the property and outlined the parts of it that we can grow veggies on. I said we can use either a really simple farm-style trellis that will be inexpensive, but your neighbors might call the HOA to complain that they're ugly. Or we can do cute trellises that will cost more, but they'll be cute. It's really important when you're working with someone and their property to give them some options, because number one, it's their place and they need to be in charge. And also having those options helps them be able to ask questions, kind of get closer to, help them understand why we want to do it this way. This property owner had mentioned deer. So the last step in figuring out what the options I could give her were finding out how much deer are we talking about? Because sometimes there's deer. That can work. But if they're always deer, they think they own this neighborhood, they will eat your veggies to the ground at least once a week. So I checked with the property owner and it turns out it's the second kind. The deer are everywhere. So slightly back to the drawing board. There are 2 ways to grow veggies in a place full of deer. You can get a dog or get a 7-foot fence. The dog was not going to work out in that situation, and the HOA does not allow a 7-foot fence. So game over. We got some takeaways here. Let's talk about them. First, this is why we talk it out thoroughly before doing anything to somebody else's property. Can you imagine if we gotten partway through, ripped up her septic field, and spilled septic juice all over her yard and needed expensive repairs because we didn't do our homework first and know where it was? Or if we'd gone to all the work of prepping up the yard and then nothing grows, because as soon as plants pop out of the ground, deer eat them down. And then we realize there's nothing we can do about the deer after we've already torn up the yard and spent all that money. That's why we talk about it first. Second, the workload of it all. This property owner was so pumped to start growing food. She was ready to do a lot of work. But as soon as we started putting down exactly what had to be done, rototilling, install irrigation, build trellises, then you can start doing the work that people usually think of with planting and weeding and picking the veggies. I could see the nerves start to come up for her. And this is where it gets really easy to go, the city people, so lazy and ignorant. So let me nip that in the bud for you right there. Most farmers in the United States do not want to grow vegetables. Why? Because they're too much work. Vegetables have to be irrigated to produce well. You might need to bring in bumblebees. They're picked by hand. You need a wash station, a cooler, and a food safety audit to properly go commercial. That's intimidating to everybody, including experienced multi-generational farmers. This is not on her for realizing this is more than I can take on. So she was really apologetic, and I told her, don't be. You already have a full-time job, and if you're not a farmer, nobody's going to give it to you straight about what doing it actually looks like, not even the farmers on social media, because recording and editing a farm setup and work season is a ton of work on top of the farming, and we already have all that stuff to do, right? So how is anybody who's new to agriculture supposed to educate themselves ahead of time on the whole workflow that it takes to get a veggie grow going? It's just not realistic to expect people to know that ahead of time. Don't feel bad about that. So I just also want to put that out there. When people say things like, oh, if food's expensive, just grow your own. And sometimes that works, but time and effort aside, here we have a person who owns half an acre of what was prime farmland before this house was built. That should be a perfect place to DIY your own food. And you can't. Because a septic tank, HOA covenants, and how a nice suburban, exurban environment makes for a perfect place for deer to breed like crazy with no predators. And I mean, you could easily solve this by just, eating a deer every once in a while to make an example, but the people who run HOAs never seem to be cool with that. Last but not least, this is the kind of exurb that people move to feel like they're in the country. It's supposed to be the best of both worlds, city job, country living. But the country living part is actually off limits. Never mind the covenants about landscaping, just the septic tank and out-of-control deer make it impossible to actually grow food in a place that's supposed to be rural. These neighborhoods are supposed to be for people who love the countryside, and once they get there, you can't do countryside stuff. I don't know, man, what are we doing here? The end. Have a great day.